Thank you all for coming out and joining us for this, what's so far been a great day, as we open up the Hitt Archaeology Center. My name is Tim SUTPHIN, and I'm the Executive Director of the Germanna Foundation. In late October, I interviewed for my position, and behind me was this nice grassy field, and there were markers marking the four corners of the building. When I arrived in December for my position, there was a foundation here and not a whole lot more. And through Christmas, it was a slow process. It was Christmas time. It was holidays, so that you had the subcontractors who were spending time with their family, which is great. And then the new year rolled around and work exploded. So as those months wore on, you see the result. We have a brand new completed building. And this is all thanks to the foresight of Russell Hitt in having faith in the future of the Germanna Foundation. So I'd like to give him a round of applause for that. This building is more than just four walls and some rooms. This building allows for the study and storage of artifacts that we find on the various Germanna properties. It allows us to expand and tell a fuller story of the peoples who populated this land in the early part of the 18th century. Not just the German-speaking peoples, but the British that built and oversaw the Fort Germanna, the enslaved that provided the labor once the Germans had moved on, and of course, the Native Americans whose population were already here on the Germanna Peninsula. The Hitt Archaeology Center gives us a place to do this scholarly work as it relates to the place and the peoples of the early 18th century. This afternoon, we celebrate not only the completion of the building, but we celebrate the future opportunities that Russell and Joan have given all of us. And next, I'd like to announce Mark Wheat, President of the Germanna Foundation.
Well, honored and distinguished guests from the National Park Service, the Virginia Department of Historic Resources, Senator Bryce Reeves, members of the Board of the Supervisors of the counties of Orange, Culpeper, and Spotsylvania, Culpeper Town Council, Orange County Chamber of Commerce, Orange County Tourism, and the representatives of American Battlefield Trust, the Fredericksburg Area Museum, Friends of the Wilderness Battlefield, Cedar Mountain Battlefield, Museum of Culpeper History, Fairfield Foundation, Minokan, Wilton House, James Madison's Montpelier, Gunston Hall, Stratford Hall, the Society of the Cincinnati, George Washington Foundation, George Washington's Mount Vernon, University of Mary Washington, Virginia Commonwealth University, Germanna Community College, and Russell and Joan Hitt and members of the Hitt family, ladies and gentlemen. Just through that introduction, you can see the wealth of heritage that we have in Virginia, and it's an honor to have you all here this afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Germanna Foundation, I welcome you to one of the most important days in the life of the foundation since its founding on March 14th, 1956. Today we dedicate the Hitt Archaeology Center, generously donated by Russell and Joan Hitt. Russell and Joan have been friends of the foundation for 2 decades and have been friends and sources of inspiration for me and my family across those decades. Advice and outlook on life that they have given my wife Marie and I are shared at our dinner table and are influencing the rising generation in the lives of my 2 children. The Hitt Archaeology Center is designed and built to carry forward the mission of the Germanna Foundation for the next 100 years, to tell America's story of liberty through the frontier experience, of her settlers and descendants using archaeological, historical, and genealogical research and interpretation. The importance of this place in the history of America will be better understood as our archaeological exploration and historical research programs continue apace. As our friend Frank Stringfellow Walker has said, when the English arrived in Jamestown in 1607, they were stuck on the beaches for a century before Alexander Spotswood's energetic governorship planted a group of German-speaking colonists at Germanna on the westernmost frontier of the British Empire in 1714. Frederick Jackson Turner's frontier thesis and Bernard Bailyn's Atlantic history are sometimes thought of as dueling interpretations of the development of the American frontier, of the American character. Happily for Germanna, this place is used as an example to support both schools of historiography and is a key reason for being a National Historic Landmark. Dr. William Kelso, the world-renowned archaeologist knighted by the Queen for having rediscovered Fort Jamestown, has written of this site, quote, "I have always thought that the Fort Germanna Enchanted Castle site ranks among the most significant historical archaeological sites, certainly in Virginia and arguably in the nation." I want to add with pride that Dr. Kelso has now joined the Germanna Foundation Board of Trustees to help us be wise stewards of our archaeological riches and to help utilize the Hitt Archaeological Center to its best advantage. The stewardship of gifts by the Germanna Foundation has given me a glimpse of how our time is redeemed. For the cost of 2 transatlantic postage stamps, a gift was generated from Ernst Flender that enabled our predecessors to buy 270 acres of the original settlement. In 1969, 100 acres of that patrimony was in turn given to create the first campus of Germanna Community College. The Germanna Foundation trustees and I are very honored to have with us on this auspicious day Dr. Janet Gullickson, president of Germanna Community College, and the entire Germanna Community College board. Thank you, Dr. Gullickson, and ladies and gentlemen. My predecessors tried to buy the Fort Germanna Enchanted Castle archaeological site in 1955, but it took us 2 generations until we were successful in acquiring it in 2013 so that we could start our archaeology program and train the next generation of archaeologists to better understand America. The message that Russell and Joan Hitt are communicating to future generations through their beautiful gift of the Hitt Archaeology Center echoes from our own experience and the words of Reinhold Niebuhr. Nothing is worth doing that can be achieved in our lifetime. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context. Nothing we do, however virtuous, can be accomplished alone. The colonists who settled here on the frontier in 2 main groups in 1714 and 1717, and the relatives who came later to settle further west, left a legacy of confidence toward the future and a joy of exploration that is part of the American DNA. 50 years ago this year, one of those Germanna descendants, Buzz Aldrin, stepped foot on the moon. 50 years from now, as the Hitt Archaeology Center reaches middle age and the time capsule sealed in its protective walls are opened, maybe we will receive greetings to this 350-year-old frontier site from donors living in a permanent settlement on the new frontier of Mars. Perhaps 1 or 2 of these colonists on Mars will return from their new world to the old, meet our successors on this very spot, and be reminded of the words of T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. May God bless you all, the Hitt family, the Germanna Foundation, and this country we love.
I am Skip Poole, and as the chair of the time capsule, which is right inside these doors, and you're certainly welcome to go inside after the ceremony and take a peek at where it is installed. There's also a display board there that gives some information about the time capsule itself. But I thank you for being here, and also I congratulate you for being part of a time capsule happening, which not many people in this world can say that they have done so. So good for you all. Let me tell you a little bit about this time capsule. It's a 22-inch tall stainless steel cylinder that we purchased from a time capsule type company from California. In it is stuff. It weighs 8 pounds and 14 ounces. There are 430 written pages inside of it, and the contents are divided up into 7 different components. The first component is a Open Me First package with a welcoming letter from myself and from MARC, as well as some ideas or suggestions for the openers in 2068 to what to do with the rest of the contents. Another component is one that I thoroughly enjoyed doing here, working with Brian Kelly over there, and it's a pictorial chronology of the early months of the building of the center, from around October time frame through when I stopped in February. That might be of interest to you, very much so. Another component is a document that describes the status of the Germanna Foundation as of December 2018 in 14 areas, such as our governance structure, the size of our genealogy database, how many Germanna records we have published, and I added questions to the Board of Trustees in 2068 to take a look at that and see, so they can assess how much the Germanna Foundation has grown and changed over the 5 decades. Another component contains a lot of pre-printed material, such as some of our newsletters, our last audit report, and a couple of copies of the last Germanna conference and reunion. But the real heart of the time capsule are the written summaries, written submissions by some 22 members of local organizations, including the boards of trustees of the counties that we mentioned earlier, as well as from 64 Germanna members. And these are very, very touching stories. And all the submitters can provide us with names of their descendants and have them be added to our time capsule open committee so that they can be present in 2068 when the time capsule is open. So in closing, let me see by show of hands who all has a piece of paper in the time capsule. Great. I thank you for your support, your participation, your enthusiasm. You all helped make it happen. Thank you very much.
All right. I'm Robert Jolley, and I'm representing the Department of Historic Resources at this event. And on behalf of the Department of Historic Resources, we want to congratulate you on your achievements and accomplishments here. My personal knowledge of this site came when I came back to the state of Virginia in 1985 as an archaeologist. And the first few months I was introduced to Enchanted Castle, and it was a large hole in the ground. Since then, there's been work done by Mary Washington College, and it's been a real struggle, but it took a lot of conscientious archaeologists to finally go and get a report of investigations that would have been done back then. It started off as a salvage project because the Enchanted Castle was threatened, and I had worked with some archaeologists to try to gather together some funding to go and get the work that had been done professionally written up. And then I was reintroduced to the Germanna Foundation actually just last week, and I did some research on it, and I was pretty awestruck as to how things had evolved at this historic site complex. So it's what has been going on here is actually pretty remarkable from a historic preservation standpoint. It's actually ideal. I do want to go and just make a couple of comments about the department's involvement, and we have recognized this as a very important historic site going back to the 1970s when staff actually participated in the initial archaeological investigations. And our staff also completed the National Register nomination for the site early on in 1977. Back then, only important sites were listed in the National Register. And prior to that, it was put on the Virginia Landmarks Register in 1969. I think the greatest accomplishment between the Germanna Foundation and the department has been putting a DHR historic preservation easement on the property, which is fairly recent. It's 2013, but this is going to go and protect the site in perpetuity from any encroachment by development. And it's pretty remarkable when you're standing here to think about it, that 300 years ago, Germanna was actually an active site where people were living there and working there. And now it's going to be preserved in perpetuity. And as a preservation planner up where our office is in Stevens City, whenever you mention preservation in perpetuity, his eyes got real big and he said, that's a very long period of time. It's longer than 300 years. Also, the fact that you're making it an educational facility, bringing in Virginia Commonwealth University, you're essentially making history come alive again through archaeology, which is something that we preach constantly. So this sort of seems to be an ideal sort of coming together. I was commenting to Tim earlier on, we're up in the Shenandoah Valley, our office, and usually the historical organizations really struggle just to go and, maintain. I'm still sort of awestruck as to how all this has happened, since, I arrived in the state and was looking at it just from a hole in the ground. Anyway, the preservation easement that we have encompasses Enchanted Castle and Fort Germanna, and one of the main things that was a topic of concern back in the 1980s was where is the fort, and Eric tells me I think that they have recovered remains of it, material culture and possibly structural remains. There's also over 20 other archaeological sites that are known about in the area. So there's a very rich heritage in this area, going back to the Native American period, going on up to the 19th century. We just commend Germanna Foundation and the college and all their sponsors on the fine job, exemplary job of preservation they've done. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Eric Larsen, Dr. Eric Larsen, the archaeologist for the foundation. Back in October, we met here. Actually, it was just a little bit over there. And we broke ground on the new Hitt Archaeology Center. At that time, I was thinking about and I remarked on the hope-filled act that new construction represents. Today, we're here to celebrate the completion of that work. Pretty exciting moment for all of us, I'd say. Russell and Joan Hitt's generosity has provided us with this really invaluable tool with which to work on discovering more about Germanna. It's a structure that holds the often overlooked tasks of archaeology. It's a place where we wash, it's a place where we process, it's a place where we catalog artifacts. It's importantly a place of storage, I'm going to relish in the fact that you can walk in there now and see largely empty shelves and a lot of more space. That's something that's archaeologists don't get to see very often. Usually our places are stuffed to the brim. We have some room for permanent storage, and that's really an important component of this particular building. It's a place to educate students and the community about archaeology and about the past, but it's also a place of social interaction for us here today. We have that now in this place, the Hitt Archaeology Center. We have this wonderful tool, and we're gonna open that door up soon with a ribbon cutting. But that, for me, my next thought is, this is really when we begin to work. We have to start to do the hard work next. 50 years ago, people became aware of the colonial governor's Alexander Spotswood mansion built nearby here. Archaeology at Germanna began at that time. By the mid-'80s, archaeologists had largely defined the extent of that foundation. It's a remarkable building. In the mid-'90s, work done by the University of Mary Washington that continued to look at the Enchanted Castle and as an archaeological site. They came across a faint remnant of a trench, which they determined to be cut for one of the walls of a wooden fort built in Germanna, built at the site in 1714. I'm gonna skip over some of the context for fear it's gonna rain, so we'll try and get on there. But that's a little bit about what's happened in the past. Today, we continue the archaeology of this place, revealing a story of what we're calling or understanding more as intersecting migrations. We're moving out from the Enchanted Castle's footprint onto the fort itself, and ultimately towards an understanding of the intersection of as many as 4 different migrations that met here in Germanna next to the Rapidan River. Those, of course, have been mentioned here before, but I'll go over again. American Indians who had lived here for thousands of years and who had to make choices as the English settlement moved closer and closer to the lands that they had inhabited for those years. Then there's the English migrating themselves, moving out of the tidewater of Virginia that had been built and established since the first days of Jamestown settlement a century before. I have to stick to my script because my colleagues know I'll go over. The small group, there's a third group, the small group of German immigrants who made the decision to leave their homes in what would later become Germany to start new lives in a new place. And then also there's the forced migration of an enslaved labor force, an African migration that replaced Germans after they moved away from Germanna. The first half of the 18th century is a very important moment in Virginia's, and yes, our national history, but it has been little studied. Germanna is a remarkable place to contemplate and share this particular moment, the transition from a coastal, tobacco-based colony towards a Virginia that viewed itself as expanding in territory and its economic base. The bulk of the written record for Germanna comes from that early days of Germanna, come from John Fontaine's few short diary entries from his visits to the fort in 1715 and 1716. His brief descriptions are very informative, but are limited in the view of the earliest days when these various groups met here next to the Rapidan River. Archaeology can now supplement this brief written record by finding and examining the things left behind. A careful archaeology program can provide additional data and information about the period and about the variety of people who found themselves here at Germanna at that time. That's the work that the Germanna Foundation has set out to do. Fortunately, we're not alone in this endeavor. In the last 4 years, Germanna Archaeology has partnered with VCU and hosted a field school where students can get hands-on training. Virginia students working on a significant Virginia site, and there's a couple of people here who took that field school. And I won't call them out, but hopefully you'll get to run into them. The foundation also supports internships where young professionals can hone their skills and gain experience. Thus far, we've sponsored 16 of these internships. And again, there's a group of interns that are here today out in the crowd. The foundation is also very glad to enter into conversations and partnerships with a variety of archaeology programs across the Commonwealth. I'd like to thank specifically the George Washington Foundation, the James Madison Montpelier Archaeology Program here in Orange County, and the Fairfield Foundation, which people are here today, and very grateful that they've made the long trip to come up here. I want to thank them for all their help and support that they've given us over the last few years. I also need to give a special thanks to Germanna Community College, who provided the support of a lab classroom that allowed us to restart excavations back in 2016. We could not have begun those excavations without this space. Now we have a new space, but we want to continue the collaborations. Thank you all for all of that support and help. While we now have a new building to support our program, we want these relationships to continue and to flourish. I'm glad at this new facility. It's called the Hitt Archaeology Center. I'm glad that its name recognizes the significant gift made by Russell and Joan Hitt. I'm also glad that it will be known as a center. This is a space for descendants. This is a space for locals and neighbors. This is a center for students, for scholars. Dare I say, this is a center for the world? Everybody can come here and learn from this place that we're going to begin and open up soon. This is a place for us to work and build community today. And we're going to do that by examining our past. But as the ribbon is cut, it's done with the intention of projecting into our future. Thank you all.
Thank you all very much. Thank you all for weathering the weather. Just passing showers. Right now I'd like to invite Mark and Eric and Tammy Collins from the Orange County Chamber of Commerce and Russell, please, to come up and cut the ribbon.
It takes us a minute to get up, doesn't it? I want to finish your story. Ready to tell you? Weave ahead. Stand in your umbrella.